Hey everybody, Zee Garcia here, and today I'm taking a look at a two-player bluffing game called Tribunal 1920. In this game, both players are trying to win a legal case, and you are going to be doing so by gathering evidence, i.e. drawing cards, and then placing out tokens in order to control different areas of this tiny little board. The game has sort of a tic-tac-toe element in which you're trying to line up tokens and win one of the rounds in the game. Win 3 of them, you win the whole thing. But there's a lot of bluffing in this game. It's mainly a bluffing game in which you draw cards, you don't show your opponent those cards, and then you say you can place a token somewhere, do so, and maybe your opponent will challenge you with consequences from there, of course. Let me go ahead and show you how it works. It's a very simple, small little game, and I'll see you on the other side. In order to win the game, each player is trying to win 3 hearings, and they are going to do that by placing these up here. So once any player has 3 of these up here, then they win the entire game. You're going to be attempting to do that by putting out the plea tokens in these spots, trying to get 3 in a row. You can do that orthogonally or diagonally. If you do that, then you win 1 of these, and we would wipe this off and start the next one. So we shuffle up the cards. There are 20 cards in here, and the cards have 2 pieces of information on them. Every card does. It's going to have 1 of the symbols that you see represented over here, and it's going to have 1 of the districts, in this case Manhattan. There are going to be 5 of each of these symbols and 4 of each of the districts. Obviously, again, combining some together. So we shuffle up the deck of cards, and we give each player 1 card, and we have a start player who would be the one who lost the last hearing, but right now we pick. So this player would start. And on your turn, there are 3 parts. The first one is you draw a card. That's mandatory. Second part is optional, and you may put out one of these plea tokens. You can put it on any one of these places if you have the matching symbols, or you can put it over here in one of these districts if you have 3 cards that show that district. However, in this game, you can bluff. So, for example, I would look at these cards here, and I would say, oh, I can go there, because I have 2 of the fingerprint tokens. My opponent now has a choice. They can say, okay, fine, you do. I'll go ahead and take my turn. Or they can call me on that and say, objection. If they do that, then I have to prove whether I was lying or not. If indeed I was telling the truth, I would show those cards, discard them, draw as many as I just discarded, and still go ahead and place my token there. If I was bluffing, I don't have to discard any cards. I simply say, okay, yes, I was bluffing. I remove my token, and then my opponent can place one anywhere they want to. And once that's done, that's step 2. So step 1, draw cards. Step 2, optional, put out one of these plea tokens. Then step 3 is discard if I have more than 4 cards. I have to discard down to 4. So again, I play there. My opponent says, okay. And then I don't have to discard. They take a turn. They draw a card, and they are going to play somewhere. So they are going to play, say, here. And maybe I'll call them. I'm like, I think you might be bluffing. And they show, they don't have to show their cards because they don't have them. They are, in fact, bluffing here. So they will say, okay, fine, I was bluffing. And then I get to put one out anywhere I want to. And then it comes back to me. I'll draw a card. And I am going to play, perhaps I'll try for Brooklyn here. Maybe they'll call me, maybe they won't. I don't quite have it. I have 2 Brooklyn and 1 Bronx card, but let's say I did have 3. And they call me on that. In fact, I'll find the right card just so I can make this legal. So let's say I have these 3 cards, and I play there on Brooklyn. They say, objection, I'm calling you on that. Well, I do have them. I'll show them. I will discard them, and you can always inspect the discard pile in this game. And I draw 3 replacements, and I still play there. And then discard down at the end of my round, back to them. The round is going to be over when somebody does achieve 3 in a line out here, or this deck is gone, all right? The special abilities over here on the side are going to denote a few different things. But let me explain before I go over them what happens when the round is over. If somebody has 3 in a row, they will get one of these. We remove everything again. The loser gets to put one of these 2 investigators in one of these spots associated with one of the boroughs. And then we start a new round. Shuffle everything up, give each player 1 card. The loser of the previous round begins. If no one made a line of 3, and the game ended from simply running out of cards, so, it ended up something like that, then we are going to check who's got the highest borough over here in this order, higher being up here. And that player wins. So the blue player has Brooklyn. They're going to be the winner, and they get one of these up here. And then the loser, again, in this case would be orange, gets to place one somewhere. And we wipe everything away, and we start again. Now, the districts, like I said, do have special abilities. The boroughs have special abilities. Manhattan does not. It's simply the highest. So if it goes to the deck running out of cards, you win if you are on there. Brooklyn lets you draw 2 cards, and then at the end of your round, you discard down to 4. Queens lets you put out this token, which blocks a space. It has to go somewhere empty, but it blocks it from both players. Bronx lets you move one that's out here already. So I could, for example, if I go ahead and go on there, my opponent doesn't call me, or indeed I wasn't bluffing, then I could move one of these somewhere else. It could be mine, or it could be my opponent's. And then the last one, Staten Island down here, lets me remove one that belongs to my opponent. So if I go there, I could just take this and give it back to them, okay? Now, having an investigator there, as explained up here, means that that player can go on that spot having only 2 cards that show, in this case, Brooklyn, not 3. So having just 2 is not bluffing for them. That's pretty much the game. That's everything that you need to know. Again, try to get 3 of these before your opponent, and you win the whole thing. There's one other tiny final rule, and that is if you call someone, let's say the game looks like this, and my opponent, I place on here, my opponent calls that one, says objection on that one. If it would be for the win, and I am not bluffing, then I get to place 2 of these out at once instead of 1. But it's, again, a corner case, a minor rule. It's just something you need to be aware of because it very much matters and would make it an automatic call if it was always for the win for me. Now you have to consider if I'm bluffing. If I'm not bluffing, you just gave me an extra one of these trial tokens, so hearing tokens. So there you go. That is Tribunal 1920. Let's go ahead and go back up top. So that is Tribunal 1920. Let's go ahead and talk about it, shall we? Starting from the top with the theme and the setting. It's very nice. I like the time period. I think that's handled well. I like the setting of it being a trial, and yes, it's a very abstracted, theme, the way it's handled here. This tic-tac-toe idea doesn't really make any sense whatsoever, but I like the setting. Thematically, this is quite loose. Setting-wise and what's going on, I do enjoy it. I think it stands out. It's not a theme we get to, or a setting, I should say, we get to see very frequently, so I enjoy it. The aesthetics in the game are wonderful. I love this artwork from Weberson Santiago. There's not a lot of artwork. There's not a lot of anything in this game. It's a small game. Few components. Tiny little square box. But what is there is striking and engaging. I like the color choices they went with for the player pieces. I like the tiny little board and how clear that is. Card quality is superb. Everything looks good. The rulebook is very nice as well. The only minor thing I noticed was some of the cards have a small misprint on them. The cards that talk about Staten Island say on the board, it indeed says Staten Island. On the cards, it says Staten Islands. It's a minor little thing. It's not bothersome really at all. But yeah, this is a well put together little product, high quality. The replay value, I think, is okay. This is a game that's going to grow if you continue playing with the same person, much like any bluffing game, in which you start to learn each other's bluffs. You start to then go into double and triple think, right? This idea of, well, my opponent usually bluffs on the first place, which is a good place to bluff, by the way, because Not a lot of cards have gone out yet, so you could very well be holding what you say you're holding. And so you then get into do they know that I normally call them on their first or second placement? And are they then not bluffing, or do they think that I think, and so on, right? So that can be interesting, but generally the game plays out in a pretty specific way, and so there's not a lot of content here, or any content, that you don't see from game to game. The game is small. It is a minimalistic design in its approach, in its artwork, in its packaging, and everything. That, unfortunately, I think translates a little bit to the replayability and the replay value of it. Game arc. Game arc, I think, is interesting because of this, the fact that you play multiple rounds, and from round to round, a few different things change. You get to know what's going on with the other player. The loser gets a little bonus where they can now go to one of the boroughs for a little cheaper, right? You can just take 2 cards to do that. You shuffle up again. You should definitely know the deck and its contents. You can check the discard pile and know what's already out, so you can make an educated guess as to whether your opponent is bluffing or not. So there's a nice ebb and flow to that. It's very interesting. So a game arc is nice. And the game is very quick as well. The ease of play also very high, right? The game is easy to explain. Not a lot of moving parts. The bluffing thing, some people are going to be more comfortable with it than others, but it's a big part of the game and something you need to, at some point, embrace. Especially if you want to speed up and get ahead of your opponent. You're going to have to bluff sometimes. You just have to try to get away with it. So I think the ease of play here is also very high. And then lastly, tactics, luck, strategy, that sort of thing. It's okay. There is certainly a lot of luck. Your opponent could be drawing into, exactly what they need, not need to bluff. And but the game mechanically has some interesting things, some subtle things. At first, when I was learning the game, I thought, it's sort of a weird idea that it doesn't seem like you are penalized if you call your opponent on a bluff and they are not bluffing, right? They get to put out the token anyway, but nothing happens to you if they were not bluffing. And it's kind of a subtle thing. I felt like I was maybe missing something there in the rules. The main thing that does happen is they have to discard the cards to prove that indeed they were not bluffing, but then they draw back up. They're burning through that deck while their token still went out. So that is interesting. The pace of the game is very interesting. Just 20 cards, and if you're calling someone a lot on their bluffs, you are burning through the deck quickly. But that also gets rid of cards that we're maybe hoping to hold back to do something else with, which is also interesting. So that idea of calling your opponent on it, the game seems to encourage that to a certain degree. And sometimes it does feel like maybe the penalty for you saying I'm bluffing and I'm not bluffing should be a little harsher towards the doubter, right? But it works. The game is interesting, and you'll learn those little nuances as you play the game, and you'll go from session to session, round to round even. So there you go. Tribunal 1920 is a small game. It's a bit of a curio, this one. It's a game that stands out because it's different, but it is small. It could be, in the grand scheme of gaming, a bit of a forgettable game. But when I think of it in those terms, as a curio, as a quirky little thing you bring out, show to someone, and they go, that's different. A 2-player bluffing game with a theme about a legal case, with a tiny little deck of 20 cards and very clear, simple rules, 20-minute playtime, then I like all those things. And it's a great looking game as well. So this one's going to squeak into a 7 out of 10 from me. That's a seal of approval. I applaud trying something different here. I like the minimalistic nature of the whole thing. And while it's not one that I'm going to put into regular rotation, not one that I'm going to be playing every weekend, right? I appreciated and enjoyed, and I know this is one that's going to make me smile as I keep coming back to it over months. Maybe not again, something I play all the time. So a 7 out of 10 for Tribunal 1920. Very neat little game. And that's going to do it for me, everybody. My name is Zee Garcia. I'll see you on the next one.